This is the Fantasy Ladder Podcast, episode 11. I'm your host, Steve, at Fantasy Ladder. This podcast is brought to you by the IDP Guys.org and the podcast network there. So please subscribe on Spotify, Apple, and our YouTube channel. That'd be awesome. So welcome back, my fantasy football friends and family. Let's climb the ladder of fantasy football together. So we're continuing the fan base series that we started here, bringing you some of my favorites from the fantasy football community to talk about their favorite teams. We're doing this to add a little bit more depth and a little bit more heart to the discussion because I may not be as plugged into these other teams as I am my own, which of course is the Philadelphia Eagles. But today we are covering the Atlanta Falcons with two amazing guests. So I'm just going to bring them on here. I'm going to start with Joe at DynastyGriff_FF. He is involved with IBT Media, and here at the Fantasy Ladder Podcast, we are big fans of IBT Media. Joe, how you doing, and how long have you been an Atlanta Falcons fan?
Doing all right, Steve. Thanks for having me. So I grew up outside the Metro Atlanta area, but never was a Falcons fan as a kid. Actually, I grew up, and my parents aren't sports fans. But I was a huge sports fan. So I played baseball as a kid, grew up in the 90s. So it was all about the Braves, during their whole World Series runs, and then got into basketball for a bit, middle school and high school. And it really wasn't until, Michael Vick got drafted in 2001 that I started to kind of become a Falcons fan, be intrigued then. But then really was fantasy football when I started playing in 2006 that I really started really getting into Falcons hardcore then. So yeah, it's been a fun wild ride for sure as a Falcons fan. But.
Yeah, I think the combination of Michael Vick and fantasy football will get anyone excited for one football, but especially too like the Atlanta Falcons. I think that Michael Vick jersey was one of the highest selling jerseys of that era. So yeah, that's awesome.
Definitely.
And you may remember this, but do you remember one of our earliest times that we've kind of connected with each other? Are you remembering this the same way I am?
I'm trying to remember.
So this was a little over a year ago. It was the IBT Fantasy Football Show Scott Fishbowl giveaway. And it was at the part where Scott Fish came on and they were doing these trivia questions to see.
I know exactly where you're going now. Yeah.
Exactly. These trivia questions to see who won the spot from this show. And they asked the question. A couple people answered pretty quickly and advanced. Well, that was me and you and someone else or whatever. And then they had a series of 3 questions. It was like, where did Mike Clay go to, or who won the very first one? It was Mike Clay. So we both smashed that and got it in. And then the final question was, what is the charity that Scott Fish, the whole thing is set up for? And it was Fantasy Cares. And you got it in like seconds before I did. I was like, no. But then I was quick to congratulate you because I knew you're a good guy and stuff. So that was cool. But and I eventually got in. So I was like really sweating getting in last year, but I eventually got in. But ever since then, I've been trying to keep up with you. So appreciate you being on the show.
Awesome. Well, thanks. I hope you did better in Scott Fishbowl 11 than I did. So,
yeah, it's a tough one. It's just so many people, but it's all in good fun, right?
Indeed.
Awesome. All right, and we have Akash at YZR_fantasy. He is doing his thing on Twitter, doing his thing on TikTok. He is hilarious and wise, especially for his age, which I imagine is pretty young. So, Akash, thank you so much for being on the show. How you doing? And how long have you been a Falcons fan?
Thanks for having me. I've been a Falcons fan, I imagine, since I was a little kid. I don't remember like the earliest years, but I've been a Falcons fan longer than I can remember, I guess. And I probably watched the Mike Vick days, but I don't remember any of them. I was 6 years old when Matt Ryan got drafted. That's all I've ever known for Atlanta football. So.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Very cool. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to start with a summary of how the 2021 season went, and then we're going to talk through our way up to looking ahead to the 2022 season. So the Falcons finished last season with a record of 7-10. First year with Arthur Smith as the head coach there. They finished third in the division. although they did miss the playoffs for the 4th straight season. And now they enter into the new year here without longtime franchise quarterback Matt Ryan, and unfortunately without their studly wide receiver Calvin Ridley, who was kind of bizarrely handed a year-long suspension for gambling. So, Matt Ryan has been the quarterback for the Falcons for a long time. Is it bittersweet for you guys? Do you think it's the best move for the team? Any sentimental value there? What are your guys' thoughts? We'll start with you, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely bittersweet. Again, starting watching the Falcons around the Michael Vick era of things, and then seeing the whole Petrino fiasco, after Vick went to prison and that kind of stuff with it. I mean, Atlanta was in a bad spot there for a bit. And so seeing Matt Ryan come in, he's really, ushered in this, 10-year plus, right, period of stability for the franchise, perennial playoff contender, often disappointing, but a playoff contender nonetheless. And, so it's, the last few years, things have obviously kind of fallen apart around him with that. But, I'm torn as whether it was the best move for the team, but I definitely think, the team, their hand was kind of forced with the whole Deshaun Watson debacle, being involved in that sweepstakes. And so it kind of forced their hand. I do think a rebuild probably was in the best direction of the team, but it's definitely still bittersweet with that. I definitely think Ryan deserved better than sticking around for a rebuild. So happy for him he got a chance to move to a contender. So.
Yeah, it's a good perspective. I remember just as an Eagles fan, when the Eagles let Donovan McNabb go to Washington, it was like, really? Like, in division, like it just, I mean, McNabb was kind of up and down, right? But overall, a very successful team with him. So that just was not fun to experience. But on just the analytical side, on just kind of keeping it to wins and losses, Akash, how do you feel about Matt Ryan being out of town? Because you grew up with them as the franchise quarterback. Does this does it sting a little bit for you, or you just kind of whatever's best to get the team back on track?
Yeah, I'm cold and I'm feeling. I'm just thinking about the team. It's tough. I mean, we had a lot of good years with Matt Ryan. It's a lot of people are worried, not worried, every single year they're thinking about what their quarterback situation is going to look like, or they're always thinking about getting a top guy. And we just had so much stability that it does kind of suck. But he's 37. There's no reversing the hands of time. And so to move on from him right now is good, because you're not going to get more for him later. And so I really feel like it was the best move for the team.
Gotcha. Sounds good. So obviously, Arthur Smith was a new head coach there last season. Did you guys like what you saw from him? And is there anything you'd like to see different going into year 2 from him? We'll start with you this time, Akash.
Yeah, I feel like he did all right for what the team had, and the team doesn't have a lot of pieces. I mean, I'm really excited for Kyle Pitts, Drake London in the offense, and then continue to build a better defense, because we had an absolutely horrible defense for some time. AJ Terrell is really good, and he was kind of a secret for a little bit, but now everyone pretty much knows how good he is. But I meant mostly, I don't know. He's really one of the only defensive players I know. Grady Jarrett as well is also always underrated, but mostly an offense guy. And so is Arthur Smith. Building an offense there that looks to be, pretty good. Obviously, it's not going to peak right now with Kyle Pitts at 21 and Drake London at 20 or 21. They're both still young, and so this offense has a lot of room to grow. Losing Ridley for the season sucks, and I don't think he's going to play for us when he comes back from the suspension either. But just from a talent perspective, he's still a top receiver in the league. So I think we'll be able to get something good for him when he comes back from that suspension.
You think the team won't want to bring him back, or do you think he doesn't want to?
I think that bridges, because he was already about to be moved before the suspension came, and so he was going to go to the Eagles, and then the that happened with, they found out it was a suspension, and the Falcons withdrew their him from the table because they didn't want to screw over the Eagles and burn that bridge. And so I really feel like he was halfway out the door before it all happened, and so he's just going to continue going that way.
Gotcha. Okay. How about you, Joe? Did Arthur Smith please you at all? It was kind of a weird year for like first year head coaches. Like the Eagles had Nick Sirianni, the Chargers had Brandon Staley. What was Arthur Smith someone you were excited to see come in, and did you like what you saw from him?
Yeah, I was excited about the hire. I think I wasn't sure what to expect going into year one with that. And, to a degree, we still saw some of the same, Falcon stuff we've seen for years with them, giving up, choking away fourth quarter leads and things and stuff like that. But it seemed like there was more of a toughness to the team. I feel like Dan Quinn, had all his mantras and things. And I love Dan Quinn and always will. I think he was a great coach, and Dimitroff, is a great GM for our team with that. But I think the message had gotten stale with Quinn a bit. And so I think, Smith brought a little more of that no nonsense toughness in that I think the team needed with that. So I think we saw. I feel like I saw a little more toughness, a little more fight to the team than I'd seen in recent years, despite some of those collapses. And I think I saw more of a creativity of the offense, really trying to use the weapons we had. Obviously, Cordero Patterson coming in and being used the way he was last year was a across the NFL. And Russell Gage, the way he was used as well. I think they did a good job of utilizing the weapons they had, and especially once Ridley went out. I mean, they really had nothing at receiver other than Gage and Pitts, so it was exciting to see the way they used that. Obviously, defensively, we didn't have much to work with as well, but I like the direction. I think they're bringing that in, and like Akash said, we've got Terrell to kind of anchor the young defense there, along with Grady Jarrett being the veteran. But we lost some talent, which we'll get to in the offseason with that. But I think brought in some good guys that will help us kind of start to rebuild that this year. So.
Yeah, I think a good point was made about like the offense certainly won't peak this season, but I think it has a very exciting way of being able to grow. I mean, assuming that the Falcons will have high draft capital again going into the 2023 draft and all that. But I think an area of concern to try to nail down would be to like improve like the overall defense, because for a while there it was like the NFC South was just like every matchup was like fantasy gold, right? It was like the Drew Brees Saints and the Jameis Bucks and stuff, and the Cam Newton Panthers. Like it just was like an awesome fantasy wise contest. Just a lot of points were scored, but definitely want to kind of bring it back down to the level that I think Dan Quinn had back in the day, or at least to try to implement and stuff. So very interesting. But kind of going into the free agency moves, one of the bigger losses for the team was Russell Gage, and of course he goes to a division rival in the Buccaneers, so that kind of stinks, right? They also did not retain running back Mike Davis and did not retain tight end Hayden Hurst. They did, however, sign Marcus Mariota, quarterback, wide receivers Brian Edwards and Auden Tate. As well as running back Damian Williams, who I think is a very underrated player, offensive tackle Jermaine Ifedi, linebacker Rashaan Evans, and edge rusher Lorenzo Carter, who has not lived up quite to his draft capital, but through his career so far in New York. But what do you guys think of these moves? Do you have a favorite or a least favorite? And do you think the moves were necessary to get the rebuild jump started?
Yeah, my favorite move would probably be signing Marcus Mariota because he's bad, and so he can get a better pick next year. That's going to be awesome. Finally he's a good bridge QB, but certainly not going to lead us to many wins. That's what I'm hoping for. And so if we can get a top 5, top 3 pick, which I think is possible, and maybe we're not, maybe we don't stoop so low as the Texans and Bears in terms of our roster, but we're definitely one of the worst in the NFL right now. And so to aim, I have my sights set on a good quarterback in the 2023 draft. And
gotcha.
So that's good. And I liked when we signed him because it said, at least to me, like enough. It gave me enough like confidence that we weren't going to reach on a quarterback, which makes me very happy. Like in this last draft, and we didn't. Right. So I also liked Ritter in the third. It's whatever, you don't expect much from him, but it's a good shot to take. So their quarterback room that they built is good for having lost Matt Ryan and looking towards the future.
Gotcha. Nice. How about you, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, just going back to free agency, I was a little disappointed we didn't do more at first to address, wide receiver, running back, in some other areas, offensive line especially, that really feel like needed some attention in free agency. But I feel like the team took a good approach to the way they're handling things. You see a lot of, 1 year, 2 year contracts, minimum salaries with that. So really can tell they're trying to, like we talked about, they're not trying to go all in for this year. They're trying to field a competitive team, bring a lot of guys in who have, something to prove, like Patterson last year and guys like, Rashad Evans this year with that, they're bringing in guys that have something to prove, that feel like they have something Auden Tate, another example of things, people that have potential, have talent, have flashed at times, but aren't going to cost a lot, will give us a shot to, be competitive in games at times this year with that, but they're not going to hold off that rebuild. Matt Ryan, the reason it was great for him to go was because his contract, was just such that we got in a bad spot with the previous regime, signing a lot of bad guys as Band-Aids, expensive Band-Aids to try to fix issues, thinking we were just one piece away. And it's clear that this regime does not think we're one piece away. And it's good to see them getting some guys in who maybe we strike lightning in the bottle. We get more Cordero Pattersons out of this group of free agents. And so I like what they're doing overall. They seem to have found some good values. I mean, I do think Mariota has something left. I don't think he's going to be a superstar and he's going to take the league by storm or anything, but I think he's a competent quarterback who I think will do well, better this time around in Arthur Smith's system than he did in Tennessee. I think he has learned and grown in Oakland, I think, the last couple of years, it seems like. And I'm excited to see him get an opportunity here with that. So again, I don't think he's the long-term answer with that. But yeah, it's great to see, these guys they brought in that come in and have a chance to compete. And, Brian Edwards is one of those guys I can't quit. So them trading for him and for a late round pick, I love to see. And so it's just, they're building a basketball team here, and it's fun to see what they're going to do on offense this year.
Yeah, the Brian Edwards experience has been really fascinating because it's like everyone is just like waiting and waiting and waiting for it to happen. And I just don't know if he's had a game where he's had more than like 5 targets, like it's just insane. Or maybe he has, I don't know. But
Yeah, he has, but he's pretty bad. I've just been sitting back and laughing at everyone who still believes. But now I guess I have to like him because he's on my team. But I mean, 5th round, did we trade for him or something? It's like, take that upside shot.
So,
like,
yeah.
That's the mentality you should take. Just take upside shots across the board for cheap. They're not going to be here in the when the rebuild's finished. If we do rebuild well, and so we're not spending on mid players and like the Jaguars did for Christian Kirk. We're taking our home run shots. We're like, all right, we're just going to get a bunch of filler guys. And then with the capital we have, we're going to take a home run shot on Drake London. That's the one big move they've made this offseason. I really like that because we needed the wide receiver. Might as well just go for the young guy who has a lot of potential and upside instead of 82 or however much it was on Christian Kirk. I feel like London's a lot better of a move there. And so looking at some of the teams that have built well, over the last couple of years, they found their studs through that way. I mean, it's like the Bengals drafted their 2 best players at the top of the first round. And then the Raiders got Darren Waller for free as a free agent. And Austin Eckler was an undrafted free agent a few years ago. It's like teams like that. I don't have any other examples off the top of my head, but not spending too much money is the key for us right now because we want to take cheap shots on upside and we want to take home run shots, and that's pretty much it. And so I really like what we've been doing.
Yeah, a question that was brewing just as we're having this discussion. You basically answered at the top of your comment there. It's like you were glad that they didn't go and pay for someone like Christian Kirk. They got a very massive discount on someone like Brian Edwards. So I think that is definitely a unique perspective. And I think I would tend to agree with you there. I think it would be very unwise, to sign someone like Christian Kirk in the position that they're in right now. So yeah, just kind of interesting stuff. But free agency is obviously only one way to build the team. We'll now summarize the 2022 draft class. Of course, they picked 8th overall, and they took wide receiver Drake London. Round 2, pick 38. They drafted a edge rusher, Arnold Ebiketie out of Penn State, with another linebacker towards the back end of round 2, Troy Anderson. Round 3 is when they got quarterback Desmond Ridder. Talk more about him in just a bit. Another linebacker in round 3. Round 5, running back Tyler Algier, who was one of my favorite running back prospects in the class, and we'll probably touch on him in a little bit too. And then offensive guard and another tight end just for depth. Any of these decisions or selections that you thought were either surprising, or good, or bad? How'd you feel about this draft class? We'll start with you, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like Akash said, I think the Drake London pick was probably my favorite of the draft picks with that. I think Atlanta, with the free agent signings and the approach they took, they got some veteran stopgaps in place. So they didn't have to draft based on need alone with that. And I think, as much as I kept seeing a wide receiver mocked to the Falcons at pick 8, I was surprised they actually went there with that. But I really do think they stuck to their board with that. I think that they very likely could have been targeting some of those top defenders or offensive linemen that went in the first picks there with that. I really do think London was the best pick on the board at the time they went for what they needed, especially. So I think he was a home run pick. I think there are some concerns obviously about him. Can he separate enough to be effective at the NFL level and things like that? But I have no concerns. I think, looking at, reception, perception, and all the work. Lots of people that I trust a lot evaluating wide receivers, I think all had great things analytically and film. I think both, when those two things line up for me, that's a home run for me. And I think you saw that both from the fantasy community as far as London and his potential impact with that. So I'm really excited about him. I think it kind of left him free again to take best player available. And I love seeing what would have surprised they didn't double dip again at wide receiver to get that. But obviously they had other plans in the works with Brian Edwards and such, the trade after the draft. But I think it left them free to really address some of those gaping holes in the defense. The pass rush, even through the Quinn years, was always, the bane of our existence as Falcons fans, was just not having the pass rush. We just could not get to the passer with that. And so we struggled against those teams that could just light it up offensively. And so that led to those shootouts we used to see in the NFC South with that. So, it's good to see them investing, in some edge rushers and some linebackers that can get some athleticism, especially losing, Foye Oluokun as well. And some of our other athletic linebackers and players who contributed a lot in the last few years with that too. So it's good to see them, restock the defense with that too. I think it was I think Ridder was a great pick in the third round. I'm glad to see they didn't reach for a quarterback, especially with how far the quarterbacks fell. I think they did a good job of taking advantage of values there and letting the draft kind of come to them. And I think Ridder's a good low cost, potentially high upside player. I don't necessarily know that he's the long-term answer at quarterback either for the Falcons, but I think he fits well in the system. And I think at worst, he's going to be a really high upside backup for us for a long time with that. So I think they really, really had a plan clearly going in, and even taking an offensive lineman, in the 6th round, and, it took a blocking tight end, I think, in the last round with that we needed for the team. So I think they had a clear plan going in and stuck to that with that. Flip side, I wasn't the hugest fan of the Algier pick with that. From watching a lot of the college prospects in preparation for the draft, he was not at the top of my board with that. I would love to see him take someone like a Jerome Ford or Kevin Harris instead of that, in the later rounds. But I think he'll be a solid depth guy in Atlanta. I think he's got a good chance to contribute this year with our depth chart. But I don't see him anything as more than just kind of a role player moving forward after this year. So
sure.
Yeah, that Ridder pick was good because, it's like a 5% chance, 10 at best, that a 3rd-round quarterback ends up as your franchise guy. But you take that shot because on the off chance he does, it's invaluable to your team, especially with the cheap contract that a 3rd-rounder carries. So it's good upside. There's a lot of people out there who think you should always leave your draft with a quarterback in some round, like in the mid-round, because of that upside. And maybe you don't do that if you have a guy like Mahomes or Herbert or something. But when you have a QB room like we do, it's always good to take that upside shot.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I am definitely intrigued by the class. It was kind of interesting. It seemed like there could have been a number of choices at that top wide receiver spot. Obviously, I mean, all the mock drafts you see, right? It's like some people gave him Garrett Wilson, some people whatever. was London the guy you guys were hoping if they targeted wide receiver, or you kind of just happy with it like now, or would you have preferred Garrett Wilson, or like what do you guys think about that? Or was London the guy you thought was correct there?
London always wide receiver 1 for me. Hell yeah. I was
Oh,
really
perfect.
happy.
Okay.
Yeah, same for me. Fantasy and NFL wise, I think he was the top option there. So.
Oh, perfect. Well, I love when that happens. I wish that would happen more often with the Eagles, but we're not going to go there today. Excellent. Okay. How about any undrafted free agents? Did any from this year's crop stand out to you? Sometimes they stand out to me, sometimes they don't. Do you guys have any thoughts on any of those guys, or not so much?
No, I don't really know who we got, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't. In previous years, I've dug a lot more into the UDFA class than this year, honestly, with that. So not as familiar, unfortunately, with some of those guys that are, competing for roster spots and that kind of stuff. I think they've done a good job of finding some hidden gems in recent years with that. But yeah, with the new regime, it'll be interesting to see kind of who emerges from this group. But yeah, I feel like it's an open competition for spots. So I think we'll definitely see a couple of guys from that group, end up making the squad with that. But it'll be interesting to see kind of who emerges from that over the course of the summer and training camp and preseason and such with that. So.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. Like some years, I'm like shocked at like who doesn't get drafted when I think like they absolutely deserved a shot to get drafted. But yeah, so some years whoever like the Eagles sign, I'm like, okay, cool. Let's see if they make the team or see if they can contribute on special teams or something. But some years are just like that, where it's just like whatever. So that's fine. That's cool. Now, I guess we did touch on this a little bit, but you guys, do you think that Ritter has potential to become a franchise quarterback, or do you think like the chances are just like pretty slim of that because of his draft capital or skill set? I think he's an interesting prospect, but mainly excited for like fantasy because of his rushing upside, things like that, and the offense in general, because I think it will start to peak here in the next couple of years. But do you think he has it in him to be a franchise quarterback, or is this just like a bridge with Mariota and Ritter?
I'll never say never, but it's pretty slim with his draft capital. Third rounder, you don't really expect much, and for good reason. I mean, really the only hit out of third round over the last decade is Russell Wilson. If you go to the fourth round, you get Dak and Kirk Cousins, but that's really it over the last 10 years. And so,
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm not really expecting that much, but it's a good bridge. But he can be a good backup. I mean, he has a rushing skill set, and that's valuable for fantasy, but it's also valuable in real life because you can create plays. And so it's good to have him on the team as a depth guy.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I liked Ritter coming out. He wasn't my top prospect in the class, but I did think he was one of the more well-rounded and pro-ready quarterbacks coming out of the draft. And he does seem like he fits the system well. I think he fits well in kind of that Tannehill mold from Tennessee, where Arthur Smith came from. So I think in the system, I think he makes a lot of sense in that role, just like Mariota does as well. So I think they, got a guy that has a lot of potential and upside that could do well in this. I think I don't think he or Mariota are going to go out and be just world beaters with that, but I think they, can both make plays happen with their legs. I think that they both can, manage an offense well. So I think for everything I've heard from him and seen from the beat writers and things from the Falcons beat writers this offseason, people will tend to be very impressed with his maturity, his leadership so far, some of the intangibles he brings so far. So I'm excited. I'm intrigued. Again, like I said, I'm not anticipating, him being, the franchise savior here from the third round. But I do think he fits the system well, and I think he can be, successful if he gets a chance to start from a fantasy perspective, especially, with his mobility and kind of being again that kind of game manager who doesn't turn the ball over. Again, a la Ryan Tannehill with that. I think he fits that mold well for the system. So again, not too enthused about his long-term prospects, but excited about the player and excited to see how he develops and excited to see him out there in preseason this year.
Gotcha. Yeah. So next year, say they have a top 5 pick and, Bryce Young or CJ Stroud are available, you would pounce to get one of them and just have Ritter continue to be the backup. Is that what you guys would think would be the best course of action?
Yeah, no question. It's go after your franchise quarterback there.
Gotcha. Sounds good.
Yeah, I mean, I'll defer to you too on the 2023 class quarterback wise. I don't watch a lot of college, so I don't know as much
me
about them
neither.
until fantasy rookie draft season and things with that. But I've heard a lot of buzz about the class, and again, some of the top quarterbacks I know a little bit about with that. So I think that seems like that's the plan that they're setting themselves up for. There's nothing in their way that would prevent them from taking a top quarterback. I mean, obviously, I'm sure they hope that one of these guys, either Marietta, steps in and catches lightning in the bottle, or Ritter steps up and is that franchise guy. They don't have to burn a top pick on a quarterback in next year's class, but I think they've set themselves up that they have no impediments to taking one of those top guys if the season goes like we probably think it will, and they finish with one of the worst records. Then I think they definitely are in a position to take one of those top guys at the top of next class.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. All right. Did you guys get a chance to check out the schedule at all? Like, just curious about like what you think are realistic expectations for like their overall like win-loss record, but by the end of the season, like, do you think 4 wins or 5 or maybe 6 wins is possible? Like, because they got 7 last year. Where are you guys at with that? What would you think is their projected record after checking out the schedule? Any ideas on that?
I don't know. I know our over/under set at 4.5, and so
4.5. Okay.
Yeah, that seems about right. I have not checked the schedule and made any predictions, but yeah, our roster's pretty 4 to 5 winsy. So yeah, I'm looking at the schedule right now. I see, I see maybe a handful of wins. Yeah, we're cooked. Yeah, we're gonna win 4 or 5 games, but it's all good.
Gotcha.
Never been one for going like 9-8 and not getting a top quarterback, not making the playoffs. So yeah, you either go for it or you just tank, and that's something that I want for my NFL team and something that I want for my dynasty teams, and so it's something in common there.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I could see the Falcons rattling off a couple of wins to start the season or early in the season. I know we play the Saints week 1. And I've heard kind of mixed information about Jameis, whether he'll be ready to go at the beginning. And I've heard, he was out there, was doing great, but I also heard reports of, he was limping, he was doing this. So, especially if Jameis is not ready to go week 1, I could see, sneaking out a win there. We played the Seahawks early in the season, who kind of could be a mixed bag with that as well. I could see, squeezing a couple of wins there, but overall, especially as the season goes on, I think the schedule is just absolutely brutal. I just have a hard time, even in most optimistic projections, seeing the Falcons winning any more than probably 6 or 7 games with the schedule we have this year. So, again, that's probably for the best with the incoming class we have coming in next year, that's the case. But unless, again, we just catch lightning in a bottle with one of those 2 quarterbacks and, some of those rookie pass rushers and veteran linebackers we brought in really to step up on the defense. I just don't see us being in a position with the teams we're facing up against next year to really probably come out any more wins than 6 or 7. Looking at the schedule.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting. So like when the outlook looks a little bit more bleak, it's like the anticipation of this. I mean, it's always high anticipation just for football in general, but like from like a fan's perspective, for example, going into the Eagles season last year, I really had very low expectations with like Nick Sirianni, and I just was really focused on like Jalen Hurts and his development. Because like if he can show that he can potentially be a franchise quarterback, or should we just look ahead to next year, or whatever. So like if you're in that stage, it's like it's kind of hard to be disappointed if like your expectations are really low, but it's still like not a fun place to be like as a fan too. And then like with the Eagles, they actually really did surprise last year. They somehow they got into the playoffs and then embarrassed themselves, against Tampa Bay. But either way, it just was like it was kind of a pleasant surprise. It gave me a lot more like confidence in what like the head coach is able to do, just because from some of the offseason stuff I like really didn't know what to expect out of him. But so I guess the primary sights are on 2023 and beyond. But like how soon do you think that they could like legitimately compete for the division? because it seems like a lot of the teams can be facing a pretty similar transition here pretty soon. Like Tom Brady's not going to play forever. So once he's out of Tampa Bay, I mean, they still have some good pieces on that roster. I would say on the older side is where a lot of their talent is. And the Saints are kind of in transition without Drew Brees, which is kind of interesting. Like all the teams are kind of peaking at the same time, and now they're all sort of going to be rebuilding at the same time, obviously, but with the Buccaneers being the favorite. So how? Any idea on when you believe that they could have a shot at competing for the division?
Yeah, in 2023, maybe if Brady leaves, and then depending what happens with Jameis, I don't know how long he's gonna be there. I don't think he's gonna be their long-term quarterback for like 5 years, but he could be there for 2 seasons, and so he'd be there for 2023. The Panthers could also get a top quarterback next year. I don't think Mayfield's a long-term guy, but with the Falcons in 2023, rookie quarterbacks, assuming we have one, are really a mixed bag in terms of performance. And so, it could just be bad and be like the Jaguars last season, where you're rebuilding, you get a rookie quarterback, and even though it's a top pick, it's just not successful in year one of that rookie quarterback. Even the Bengals with Joe Burrow, he was good in his rookie year, but they still, of course, he had that injury, but they still only won a few games even when he played, and they ended up with a top 5 pick. And so 2024, I think, is where I'd set my sights at, because that's when you start to see the quarterbacks, if they're good, make that jump. We saw that Burrow make that jump. We're kind of projecting it and expecting it for the 2021 quarterbacks. We saw it a couple of years ago with players like Kyler Murray, Carson Wentz, Jared Goff. All of them took a big jump in year 2 and had their franchises be more successful. And so I think it all hinges on the quarterback play. It's obviously why you want to secure that top quarterback, because they can really carry the franchise in that sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely, I agree. I think 2024 is probably the most realistic goal, especially if you consider, if you think Brady plays for 2 this year and 1 more after, potentially. I know he's got the broadcasting deal lined up, so it seems like maybe this is the last hurrah. But we thought that last year possibly as well, and he retired and unretired. So who knows? I think as long as Brady's there in the next couple of years, I don't know that we can compete with Tampa in the division.
And even if we do make the playoffs in 2023, we're just going to go the way of the Eagles and fail in the playoffs the first round.
Yeah, that was really rough to watch, because it's like I got together with my brother. We're like, oh, let's get pizza. Let's really enjoy it.
What percentage do you think they had to win that game?
Oh, I don't think they had a chance to win the game. I just wanted it to be like enjoyable, and it really. Whether they started moving the ball when it was well over, and it was snowing here at that time. So I was like debating, do I want to stay and then drive in like literal snow covered roads an hour, or do I want to try to beat the snow and get home safely? And I just left like at the start of the 4th quarter, got home safely, but missed all like the Eagles action. It was just a bad day. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, it's interesting because like the Saints were kind of making moves to suggest that they were like legitimate like contenders, and I was kind of surprised by that because
they're so fraudulent. They're frauds.
I think Jameis is a very fun player, but I don't think he's ever played in a playoff game, and if he has, I doubt he's won it. And they're like making these moves.
Drew Brees, right? In that one playoff game,
he did, yeah. So that's
true.
Okay. I think he did come in and play that game.
When Brees got embarrassed in his last ever game, his final NFL game of his career, and he got embarrassed by the Bucs. They're like 30 interceptions. That was amazing.
Oh, okay. I'm remembering that now. Yeah, gotcha. Oh, because that was in New Orleans, right?
Yep.
Yeah. That's right.
On their own field. That was amazing.
Yeah, I thought their trades pre-draft were very aggressive and very like a little short-sighted, but I'm going to be talking to a couple Saints fans next week, so I'll see what they have to say about that. But
clearly they don't spend too much time on Dynasty Twitter. They trade a 23 first for a 22 first. They got it backwards. They did it the wrong way around.
Yeah, no. So me as an Eagles fan, I was thrilled about that move. But I just was very, just was very curious to me. What exactly the Saints thought they were going to do there. But who knows?
Yeah, I
Maybe.
mean, they've got a good offensive core. I mean,
Sure.
they've gone from like literally no one on offense except Kamara to having MT, who I expect to bounce back. As much as I hate the Saints, I like MT because he's a good player. Can't
Right.
disrespect him. I like Jarvis Landry. He's a good player.
Yep.
Olave has upside as a rookie, and then you still have, well, you maybe have Kamara. We don't know what's going to happen with him.
Right.
So yeah, they could be good enough to not be bad, but not good enough to not be like I don't think they're going to go far in the playoffs if they make it. So Eagles first probably going to be like early 20s at worst, and so not that
Right.
scared about the Saints right now. Don't like their move.
I just thought that was interesting because, like, even at best, like, Jameis can still be pretty erratic, and I'm not even sure about the status of his health. So it just seemed like kind of odd, unless maybe that's suggesting that he will be okay. I don't know. It just seemed like a little over aggressive, but yeah. So I think like the Falcons are a very intriguing team to keep an eye on here in the next couple of years. But this is a fantasy football show at the end of the day, so we are now gonna shift towards that a little bit more here. So I'm just curious about your guys' favorite offensive players to target on the Falcons at cost. Anyone stick out to you? At cost, of course. You can go either direction, redraft or dynasty, or give one for both.
Kyle Pitts, always Kyle Pitts. He's hyped up so much. Right? I feel like some people get it, but some people just don't understand just how good he was last year. And I made
Oh
this
no, yeah,
comparison on Twitter. I feel like it's apt that it's a little bit of me getting on a hype train, but it's not a bad comparison to say that Kyle Pitts' rookie season at the tight end position is the tight end equivalent of Jefferson and Chase's rookie season at the wide receiver position, because they're all broke records. We all project them to be really, really good. And I feel like, you can expect that for Kyle Pitts for him to take that another leap in his second season. So I think he's going to be really good. I think top 3 at worst tight end. He could easily be the tight end 1. He's basically a wide receiver. He's a cheat code. He's 6'6", 4'4", 40. It's like, how do you stop him? The answer is that you don't. And then he ends up being the first rookie tight end to have 1,000 yards in the Super Bowl era, I think, right? I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, the one stat that really like opened my eyes to like just how good of a year he had was he had only 8 more catches than Pat Fryermuth, but had like 500 more yards.
Oh
So
yeah, I mean,
like,
him and Pat Fryermuth are like polar opposites. Where Fryermuth is like, I don't know what compare him to. He's like, he's nowhere close to Kyle Pitts athletically, and then he just works so much shorter than him. Kyle Pitts is like, he's insane at the tight end position, where he's working downfield so much that he offers so much value, both to fantasy and to your NFL team, where you can really get a bunch of chunk plays from him, and that's really valuable. And so, yeah, I'm not,
yeah, it's interesting because like Fryermuth had like a bunch of touchdowns and Pitts only had the one. So it's like if that levels out, I mean, he could be putting up like wide receiver 2 numbers. Like is that how it would break down? Like Kyle Pitts' season would have, like, if he was a wide receiver, would have been around like a wide receiver 2, you think?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe a wide
Okay.
receiver 3 in points per game. I think in like non-tight end premium, he only had like close to 12, but that's really good
Gotcha.
for rookie tight end. And to
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah.
have his peripherals like a 21% target share at his ADOT, where he's working so much down the field, to have that level of target share as a tight end is really good. And so I feel like the sky's really the limit for him. He didn't turn 21 until halfway through the season. He's like half the season on his way to 1,000 yards. He's only 20 years old. It's crazy. It's awesome.
Yeah, so he's absolutely just like a dynasty gold mine for sure. How about you, Joe? You have anyone you like at cost for either redraft or dynasty?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big dynasty guy, so I mean, dynasty wise, I'm all in on Pitts as well. I think even in Superflex startups, there's probably only 6 or 7 guys I'd take over Pitts, if that,
Oh wow,
in
okay.
the startup right now. So he's just probably maybe the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks, Jefferson, Chase, and then Pitts. For me, so he's right there with that group, right there with Jefferson, Chase for me in dynasty startups with that. So I'm all in him at the cost, especially in tight end premium. London, I'm a big London guy, as we talked about earlier with that as well. So, he's right inside that top 15 wide receivers in Dynasty for me at this point already. So, he's a guy that I was hoping to get a share of in my rookie drafts and just wasn't able to get one. Finally made a trade and started to get him eventually. So I had at least one share of him. But I think he's a guy that I think can come in and be surprisingly productive this year in redraft as well. I think he's a great. If you're looking for like a middle to late round, wide receiver target, I think he's a great player who could have more of an impact than people are thinking with that. I think people are down on the offense because of Mariota, understandably so, but I think he's one of those guys, along with Pitts. I think both, especially with us being probably behind as many games we will be, I think they're going to have to throw the ball more than maybe they'd like to long term. So I think both of those guys can command a high target share and be productive this year with that. So, Mariota, if you're in a super flex league, even redraft, I think it's worth a late round flyer for that. I think he can be, if the season starts going south and they want to give Ritter a shot later in the season, but if you need somebody to hold you over to start the season and just be a good veteran stopgap, I think Mariota, with his ability to rush, can be a good, QB3 type option on your bench in dynasty or redraft. I think there's lots of guys that can be, I think those guys there, those 3 can be contributors to your team. Ritter and Mariota at cost in dynasty as well. I'd send an early third potentially for Mariota if I needed another quarterback, a QB3, QB4 type there. And Ritter, I think I saw going off the board somewhere around the mid to late second in this year's class. So I know people most are done with their dynasty rookie drafts at this point of things, but I liked him at cost of where he was going there. I think in this class that was a good gamble for him with that. So those are all guys I'm in on in dynasty and redraft.
Yeah,
gotcha.
For
Nice.
Drake, I only have like one chair across my dynasty leagues, and so it's under. I think it's like 7% of my dynasty leagues is one league, and so it's tough because I really like him as a player, and obviously he checks the boxes for me at every step, which is analytically and draft capitally, where he absolutely smashed production wise, and then he got 8th overall draft capital, which is fantastic. But everyone else agrees with me, so there's no edge to be had, and everyone maybe agrees with me too much. So, and he's going like around the range of like DK Metcalf and Deontay Johnson and DJ Moore in dynasty startups, where I really like him, but I just can't stomach that cost. Where I take those the more proven, they're like already elite guys, and so I'm projecting London to be elite too, but.
Which is a little bit of patience on the front end, I guess, of that.
Right. You always have more confidence when you've seen it in the NFL. And so even with projecting one to be an absolute stud, Deontay Johnson's already there. DJ Moore's already there. DK Metcalf already there. And so, but hey, I'm never going to be against someone rostering London because I'm absolutely expecting big things out of him.
Gotcha. Yeah, the one player I am just very intrigued by is the running back that they drafted. Because as I was looking into him more, he's only been playing running back full time for only like 2 years, so it's just kind of interesting. He can still develop and learn. Yeah, he was a line. He started as a linebacker at BYU, then transitioned to running back, and then was like really productive. It was like really awesome. But. So he's kind of like still learning the position, which kind of course be risky, at the next level. But I just kind of look at it like, well, if it doesn't cost too much, it'd be fun to kind of see how it goes. But I mean, if it's like the late second round of your rookie draft, it's that's kind of time to not just throw a dart. You know what I mean? So I do understand that, but he's definitely a guy I'm very intrigued by, for sure. I did do a I finished up a startup over the 4th of July weekend, and I ended up with him as my running back 5. So I think that's enough of like wiggle room where I can kind of see how it goes there. But he was one I was trying to get a share of and just could not get him until just then. I'm like, one more startup, and if I get him, that's great. And if not, I'm just not going to get him this year. But yeah, that's cool. But one redraft player I am kind of intrigued by at a certain degree is Cordero Patterson still. I think if I can get him as like a flex option or like top of the bench option, I'm like very happy with that. I think it would be foolish to expect the same sort of a season this year as he had last year. Where are you guys on CPAT? Or you think you'd be willing to try to catch that magic in a bottle again, or do you think his role is going to be suppressed? How do you guys think about him?
Yeah, it's certainly interesting because he was good last year, and so when a player has their first ever good season at 30, you want to scream regression, but then everyone else screams it too, and so I'm interested in him too because he's being priced down so much relative to how good he was last year, and obviously I know that there's no guarantee that he's going to have the same role and same production, but I'm interested in him definitely. It's worth it because he was a top 24 running back last year, and so if you can get that in the like what probably RB 40s range right now, is he going? Yeah, it's a good pick. He's a good pass catcher and probably leads the team in carries again, and so that's a good combo for you to get another good season out of him.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be like a nice little like security blanket for like Mariota. Like if he's being rushed or whatever, can't get the ball down the field, and if Patterson's there, I think you get a lot of like little cheap like PPR points that way. But
Yeah,
how
plus
about playing?
he's more than he can do so much more than like just check downs. That
Oh yeah,
he can run real routes, which I think is really valuable. And it was really valuable for us last year when Ridley was out for the season.
Yeah.
And he was used more in that way. And we Gage left, Drake's in, but beyond Drake and Pitts, we really have no other viable receivers, and so he can definitely be in the. I think he could be our third target definitely because he does have that capability.
gotcha. How about players to fade at the projected cost? Is there anyone in this offense that you just are pretty much like just not into for dynasty or redraft this year?
Yeah, I mean, I know you like Algier and you talked about him, but you just like I don't know, he's being priced up just because the backfield's open. But I don't think that should be a reason to price them up because you have to actually be good to seize that. And that opportunity is nice, but out of 5th-round running backs over the last since 2010, 36, I believe off the top of my head, running backs have been drafted in the 5th round, and as rookies they averaged 4.4 points per game. You just can't expect that big of a role from them. They averaged they averaged just under 5 carries per game, and so the really low floor pick there. And obviously, you're drafting backup running backs. It's not like he's being super high valued, but just in just looking at like rookie ADP, I prefer like Mechie, Tolbert, Brian Robinson, Tyrion Davis Price, Wan'Dale Robinson, Matt Corral. I would just prefer all of them to him because their draft capital is better, and some of them just have better prospect profiles overall. Or for Corral, it's a much more valuable position to hit on. And so I'm just not seeing it. And like best case scenario in Dynasty that he just the next Michael Carter where he has an okay season in an empty depth chart and just gets replaced next year. And so
yeah, that's where I was.
That's very fair. Yeah,
I love straw manning backup running backs because they're so low chance to hit that it's easy to be right.
Gotcha. How about you, Joe? Anyone you're fading in the Falcons offense this year?
Yeah, I mean, redraft wise, I'm intrigued by Patterson. I do think he's probably someone I think by the time August rolls around, and if it looks like he's entrenched as a starter, I think his ADP is going to start creeping up into a range that I'm probably not going to be taking him. In that, being a 31-year-old running back, I think that's, there's upside there for sure, and I definitely agree that he can be that third target for us. but probably going to be other guys I'm going to take a shot on at that point than him. Again, especially if I need somebody that can be a stopgap, I've got a guy that's going to be coming, if let's say I take Alvin Kamara and it's looking like he's going to be suspended, and I need somebody that can hang on for a few games and fill in. I think he's a great player like that. He's not somebody, especially with, the injury last year, that kind of derailed the running back one season he was having for a while there. I had him on a ton of teams last year. He was great. He was a cheat code last year for sure. But, I think his ADP, if it stays low, I think he's worth a gamble for sure. But I think he's the kind of player that we're going to see start to creep up in ADP some as the season nears and all that. So I think I'm probably not going to have a lot of shares of him in redraft. But dynasty-wise, and dynasty-wise, same thing with that. I'm probably out on him in dynasty. He's not, the kind of player, unless I can get him for really cheaply, late third, early fourth round pick, I'm probably not going to invest significantly in him at all with that in dynasty. As far as, dynasty-wise, again, Algier is another guy too. I think Akash hit the nail on the head there. I think the best case scenario for him is he has a season like Michael Carter, and then, he gets replaced by a higher draft capital running back, this year, or another free agent signing. I think typically you don't see guys that with that fourth round, fifth round draft capital that get a lot of security, safety in that role with that too. So, I think he's a great player. And, if you pick him up in dynasty, he's one of those guys I'd look to flip, if he has a good game or two, or.
Oh yeah,
like
sure.
The camp reports start coming in that he's going to, if the camp reports start coming in that like he's the RB1 and not Patterson, I think you could easily get like a 23-second from him, and a 23-second on like the 50% chance that it's in the top 6 picks in the second round. I think you easily get a really good wide receiver prospect there, and just like stacking seconds is always a productive strategy. And so if you can flip him for a future second at any time between now and week 1, I think it's absolutely should do that.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. Yeah, I like that. Okay. Very good. All right. Yeah. So for me, when it comes to redraft fading, I typically am not the guy who's going to be taking one of the top tight ends, like where they go. So I kind of hate to say this, but I'm probably not going to be drafting a lot of Kyle Pitts and just like your standard redraft leagues. The way I usually manage that is I try to target these guys where appropriate, like through trading, like mid-season. So like if it works, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But as far as just like team building goes, I probably won't have a lot of Pitts. And then the people that are drafting Pitts probably higher than ADP, they're not going to want to trade them away unless they're just like out of it or something. It depends on your league. Hopefully you have like tanking rules in play, but either way. So yeah, I probably just won't be having a lot of Kyle Pitts, and it's not because of him himself. It's just more because of the way I like to build those redraft teams where I just try to get like a nice core of running backs and wide receivers. But I did an episode covering the Ravens several weeks ago, and Bob Miller, who's the owner of Dynasty Pros, one of the sites I write for. He's a big Ravens fan, and he was saying he would not hesitate to take like Mark Andrews in the second round. And his argument, I think, was extremely valid. And it was kind of starting to change my mind. So I do buy into that. I just have more confidence in team building. Like it's just like how I feel about my team. I don't like them as much if I go early tight end, but then like the actual result of it'll probably work out. You know what I mean? A lot of people who take Kelsey, like last year in the first round, they did extremely well. So it's just interesting. So that's something I'm kind of like working through, but I got to get out of those old habits, I suppose. But yeah, it's definitely not a slight against Pitts. It's just kind of some of the way that I like to build my roster. That's all.
What's his argument, like the value above replacement? What was his argument that was starting to sway you?
He was just saying about like in that offense, he's just is going to be the primary target, and he'll likely get like wide receiver 1 production. And it is true. So
like last year, on a production above replacement standpoint, Mark Andrews had higher value over replacement than any wide receiver not named Cooper Kupp. And Kelsey was about equal to Justin Jefferson in terms of wins above replacement. And so the value that they're offering to your team is really great. And so if you can get Kyle Pitts in the third round to offer that, and both of them, by the way, had higher wins over replacement than Jonathan Taylor. So if you need any more incentive to go 0 RB, there it is.
There you go.
Stop drafting running backs. Yeah, so if you can get a guy like that in the third round, who I think you can definitely project to put up those kind of numbers at the tight end position, I think it is absolutely worth it at that ADP. You have to do projecting, like you have to do with a lot of young players. You see that leap going into their second year. You see a sophomore leap from a lot of guys, and so for Kyle Pitts, who last year had like a 21% target share on his ADOT, especially, I think you could definitely see him rise up into the 23 to 25 range for target share, maybe even higher, just because of how good he is and how good of a prospect he was. You can project him for even a leader ceiling. And so if you can get that, it doesn't really matter what the situation is, what the QB play is, and it just by sheer volume, it'll move mountains for your fantasy team.
I love that. Okay, great. Yeah, so guys, I think we nailed it. I think we covered the Falcons. I think we have a very realistic outlook for the 2022 season here. Just want to thank you both again for coming on, and we'll just do a little round of plugs here. So we'll start with you, Joe. Just tell everyone where they can find you and your stuff, and tell people what you're involved in here.
Sure. Yeah. You can find me on Twitter at dynastygriff_FF. So I am an editor for In Between Media. You can find at IBT_media on Twitter. Great site. Offers, kind of life advice mixed with fantasy football advice as well. Lots of other fantasy sports as well. There's a weekly podcast during the season and lots of great articles coming out. Lots of really talented people that write there, really passionate about offering, life advice as well as, giving you fantasy advice as well. They do, NASCAR and golf and other sports as well as fantasy football. So lots of great stuff at the site. I'm going to be working on putting out some dynasty rankings soon as part of the Patreon there that we've begun at In Between Media. So I encourage people to check out the Patreon and get involved there. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm involved in.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. All right, Akash, how about you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at YZR_fantasy. I post tweets that sound good in my head, and you can find me on TikTok at the same handle where I post actual content that'll give you good information instead of just bad jokes. Follow me on both, especially on both, but I might have a Patreon coming soon, so updates will be on. I'll update both platforms based on that. And so, if you want to give me money, you should go follow me. It's a win-win for me, and a win. It's a win-lose for you. You win good content, and you lose just a little bit of money. I promise I won't overcharge.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I do encourage everyone to do that because you are hilarious and you are very wise. And Joe, love the team there at IBT Media. Love all the content. It's just a little extra flavor to a story, not just here are the football players you want to play for the week. Really, really great insight. Really, anything I've read from that site has just been quite moving and also just quite insightful on the fantasy football content side of things as well. So guys, thank you so much again for coming on, and best of luck to your Falcons and to the rest of your fantasy teams here coming up. Appreciate you coming on and have a good one.
Thanks for having us.
Yep, you got it.